There are tons of different bugs that are available to feed to your chameleon, but it can be hard to know which bugs you can feed all the time versus which ones are treat bugs, which ones can be fed to an adult chameleon, which ones are safe for a baby chameleon. So I'm going to be going over all the different bugs that you can feed to your baby chameleon. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So these recommendations are going to be for a chameleon that's at least 3 months old or older, ideally under a year. 3 months to a year would be the age range that we're talking about. If you have a chameleon that's under 3 months, that's considered a hatchling, and that's going to have slightly different care requirements than a chameleon that's 3 months or older. This is why I always recommend that you buy a chameleon that is already established at that 3-month age, because then it's easier to find bugs that they can eat. They're a little more hardy, more established versus a tiny hatchling or buying a chameleon egg. Now, if you are buying an egg or have a hatchling, flightless, fruit flies, pinhead crickets, those would be good starter bugs as you continue to do your research. So let's talk about if your chameleon is a baby. So the number one, probably most popular option would be crickets. These are a great bug that you can feed all of the time. You just want to make sure that they're properly gut loaded and supplemented. So gut loading is the process of feeding those bugs fresh fruits and vegetables so that their bellies are full of all of the micronutrients. And then supplementation is the process of putting those powders on top of the bugs to help balance out the calcium to phosphorus ratio. Now, if any of this you're like, what? I've never heard of any of these things. Don't worry, I do have videos on gut loading and supplementing, so you can dive deeper into those topics. But we're today just gonna be talking about what bugs you can feed. So crickets are a great option. Dubia roaches would be another good option. Dubia roaches are illegal in Canada and Florida. If you live in one of those two places, then you could also look at red runners or banana roaches. But Dubia roaches are super great. They're not noisy, they're not jumpy, they're not smelly. I personally prefer to feed Dubia roaches over crickets, but some people get freaked out by the roaches. I totally get that. So then you can use both or just use crickets. The point being is that you'll want to use at least one of these two bugs to be your primary staple feeder. If you live in Europe, locusts are pretty popular, so you could also feed small locusts to your chameleon as something that you feed regularly. Now let's switch gears into worms. So black soldier fly larvae, also known as phoenix worms or calciworms, would be a great option for your chameleon, especially as a baby, because they're pretty small. Even though larges are still small for your chameleon, Venus was eating larges the very first day that I brought her home at 3 months old. So those would be great. They're high in calcium and great for your chameleon. Silkworms are another good option. We want to make sure that they're not too big for our chameleon, so make sure you're getting the small size. And remember, the general recommendation for size of bugs is you don't want to feed your chameleon any bug that is wider than the width between their eyes. It doesn't necessarily matter how long the bug is, but how thick the bug is. And so that's how you can gauge what size you should be feeding to your chameleon. A 3-month-old or baby chameleon should be really eating extra smalls to smalls, and then you can move them up to mediums, and my adult chameleons typically eat large Dubia roaches. So those are all the bugs that you can feed to your chameleon on a regular basis. How much you feed is dependent on the age of your chameleon. A baby chameleon is going to be eating as much as they can because they're growing. So feeding them once in the morning so that they have time to bask and digest and process their food, anywhere from 10 to 15 bugs. Now this will vary on the size of the bug, your chameleon's appetite. If you just got them and they're getting adjusted to their enclosure, they're probably not going to eat as much. But as long as your chameleon is continuously eating at a steady rate, growing, shedding, pooping, then they're doing great. Don't get too caught up on the specific numbers, but I always like to track how much my chameleon is eating. Now let's move on to treat bugs. So some good treat bugs you could feed to your chameleon would be waxworms, superworms. Those are considered treat bugs because they're higher in fat than some of the other bugs that we discussed. You'll also see mealworms. Mealworms look very similar to superworms, but they're slightly different. They are different. They're different bugs. The reason why mealworms aren't recommended as much as superworms, even as a treat bug, is because mealworms have high levels of chitin, which can be difficult for your chameleon to digest. So that's something that I try to not feed regularly to my chameleons, and instead, if I want to feed them a treat bug, go for the superworms or waxworms. Another common bug you'll see are hornworms. These are a great treat bug once your chameleon is older, because the hornworms get really big really fast and will be way too big for a little baby chameleon. So it's better to wait until your chameleon's at least 6 months old or older. Again, depends on the size of the worm in your chameleon before you start offering them hornworms. I know a lot of people who have offered them a hornworm that was way too big and then their chameleon became like scared of them. So I just would wait until they're bigger before you offer them the hornworms. Now, as far as kind of like the ratio of regular bugs to treat bugs, I get asked that pretty frequently as well. So you have your staple bugs, I feed those all the time, and then as a baby, maybe 2 or 3 times a week would be totally fine to give them some treat bugs. The treat bugs can be a good way to bond with your chameleon so they can associate you with a positive experience. So offering them the treat bug by hand or in a little dish or cup would be a great option. But as long as they're growing and you're providing them a variety of bugs, that's what's important. What we want to avoid doing is just feeding them one type of bug and that's it, right? The more variety, the better, and everything in moderation. Now let's briefly talk about where to purchase your bugs. So if you're purchasing from a chain pet store, there's a high likelihood that those bugs aren't going to be as nutritional or healthy to feed to your chameleon. And chameleons have a tendency to get parasites that can sometimes be passed through their bugs. And I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that they can get parasites, but making sure that you're feeding your chameleon healthy bugs is important. Just like for us with, other pets that we have, or even just us as humans, right? Where we source our food is equally as important as the kind of food that we're providing. So I would encourage you to find either a local retailer or someone online that produces bugs that are exclusively made for reptiles that are healthy, well-bred, that have a long shelf life, longevity, and are really just healthy for your little guys. So I have a bunch of different discount codes and brands that I work with that I personally use and recommend. So if you at any point are looking for recommendations or just wanting to try somewhere new, I will have those linked down in the description box below. So you guys have it. Hopefully this helps give you a jump start on knowing what bugs to feed to your chameleon. Just recognize that every chameleon is going to be different. These are just guidelines and recommendations, but I hope this helps get you started. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments down below, feel free to subscribe so when I post a new video. Follow Neptune and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching. As always, you can find all of my discount codes, book a video call with me, merch, always linked down in the description box below. Always have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! There's a little hair on me. Descriptions, discounts. Oh, let's try this again.